Welcome to the latest episode of the Vinyl and Celluloid podcast. It's that time of the year again, the end of the awards' long journey signaled by the Oscar ceremony. I'm joined for the fourth year in a row by my good friend Duarte Mendonça. We will be talking about the movies that made 2021, this year's Oscar surprises and snubs, and discussing this year's nominees across 8 different categories. Stay tuned. So Duarte, thank you again for agreeing to be here, to be a guest once again. It's the fourth year in a row. I mean, 5 on the All-Star fame or something like that of the Vinyl and Celluloid podcast. But as always, it's a pleasure to have you here as a guest.
Thank you. It reminds me a little bit of that SNL sketch, the Five Timers Club.
Yes, yeah.
All I need is for us to do this in person, so you can give me a little robe with the number 5, and we can just chill out in this private room.
Yeah, and we'll try and get Martin Short and Steve Martin and all the other Martins to show up. Maybe even Sir Paul McCartney. Bring it on. So Duarte, we're here again, like always, to look at the year that just ended a few months ago, but still the movie year that was 2021. And I mean, I think for once, this is quite an unusual Oscar race, different at least from the ones that we covered so far. And maybe it's the circumstances surrounding it. But before we get to that, I mean, 2021 in review. What was your thought, or what's your thought on the film output of the year? Productions were resuming, theaters were slowly opening up. I think the first time I went to the movies with you since the pandemic started was A Quiet Place 2. Yeah, and that was the second time I went to the movies since the pandemic started. So it was kind of like back to normal, but not quite yet. But that being said, what's your take on 2021,
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I think it was just really good to get back into the cinemas. I think everyone was really happy to sort of see life slowly go back to normal, and in particular for cinema lovers such as ourselves, it was amazing. I mean, I remember going into that cinema room for the first time since some of these restrictions were getting lifted, and just having this sense of relief almost, and also like another sense of belonging as well as being at home, because it was a place that I dearly missed, and to watch movies in the big screen is an experience like no other, and so it was great to be in that situation. Now, having said that, though, I have to say, and I think we discussed this, or we touched upon this in some of our private conversations. I don't think the movie output for last year has been outstanding. It's just, it was very lackluster in many ways. You did have some movies that were really good, outstanding even, but very few. I don't think it was. Just looking back to other years, I've had periods that have been much more rich in terms of the output out there.
I mean, I tend to agree with that, and I mean, when I look back, when I was making my top 10, or when I was selecting my top 10 picks of the year, you're spot on. I mean, there were some really good movies, and I guess. Hindsight and only time will tell if they were really that great, because I guess since we were all a bit deprived of big screen entertainment, maybe that helped a bit to see the movies better than they were. But there were still some great features, in my opinion. I just think it's still a transition year, and like I said, it was quite a solid year, not nothing to write home about, and it seemed that biopics, they just since the success of Bohemian Rhapsody, they just seem to be, well, it's a fertile time for this kind of movie. So yeah, we try to see, we tend to see quite a lot of them, and they tend to be somewhat of a safe bet in terms of the prestige features. But at the same time, I think 2021 brought some great progress, especially when it comes to international features. And I know this year again, you weren't able to go to the Cannes Film Festival, and I know that you've been before. But it's interesting to see how these film festivals, Cannes, Venice, etc., are influencing the Academy, and also, more mainstream tastes. I don't know if you agree with me on this one, but it's something that I've been witnessing, and I'm really excited about the future prospects.
I haven't really noticed so much the influence of those festivals onto the Academy, for instance. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I just haven't really given it too much thought, I guess. It's not something that organically has come up to me, and I've been thinking about it. I do think that those festivals are getting a lot more interest from mainstream audiences, in the sense
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Not only the Academy, but also like the impact. Well, the Academy is the final stop, but I was exactly getting to the mainstream audience interest. Please carry on.
Yeah, that I agree with. I think more people are looking at other festivals and feeling like their choices, their award-winning movies, are a lot more relevant and become top of the list kind of thing to watch, rather than the Oscars. I think a lot of people have been extremely disappointed with some of the movies coming out, and some I tend to agree, others not really. It's funny actually, because not to get ahead of ourselves with the subject, but like Power of the Dog has been a movie that a lot of the people that I've been speaking to have really underwhelmed a lot of my friends. I mean, I really liked it. I thought it was a great film, but given the expectations, given the amount of nominations that's been getting, and so on, it's a movie that people, I think, we're expecting a little bit more. And to be honest, though, I mean, maybe that's not the best of examples, because actually that movie has been doing well in every other festival too. So actually, it hasn't really served the purpose what I was trying to do here. But I just think it's one of those things where, just because a movie is doing really well in terms of nominations at the Oscars, it doesn't necessarily translate into massive viewership from everyone else. Because I think people are sort of like looking at it with a sort of a level of suspicion, let's say. But yeah, I think I certainly am looking at other films from international festivals a lot more. I'm also looking at more independent and even foreign films as well, because I think the quality has been fantastic over the years. But yeah, that's a really interesting subject. I actually think that it would be fun to see how people actually take on board those same festivals that we were discussing, like Venice and Cannes and stuff like that, in about 5 years' time, because I think the trend just keeps on growing.
I'm expecting. Well, expecting is not the right word. I'm actually looking forward to see what's the bottom line impact. And I think you're absolutely right with going beyond the festival, but more the nature of the movie, be that the indie, the art house, and we'll talk about that with one of the nominees. But also documentaries, right? It's very interesting, and this is something that's a very good point about, I guess, Netflix, because they did start as, and they are a very good platform for documentaries, and I think the mass appeal that Netflix has actually, yeah, I'm saying something positive about Netflix, who knew? But the mass appeal that Netflix has actually translated into, broadening the minds of mainstream audiences, and actually, propel the role of the documentary. And I think all this change is a perfect segue to my next question to you, which is the fact that this has been a bit of an unusually quiet award season. Still a bit of COVID, the backlash of COVID. The Golden Globe boycotts, the current political situation in the world. So it contributed to be a quite an unusually quiet awards season. But when we look at the bigger picture, even without this, all these circumstances that surround the ceremony, we look at we are seeing a continuous decline in Oscar and the ceremony and the interest around the whole award show. The interest is simply declining, right? There's a decline in viewership, general, interest in post, pre, during whatever Oscar season, and that leads us to find or to identify or to ask ourselves and actually the Academy a question that is, are the Oscars still relevant? Now, we can look at the ceremony as like a 3-hour event that happens every year, fine. Now they're trying to shorten it by pre-announcing some of the winners, and that, I think, it's a lack of respect towards technical categories. They are no less important than the other ones. But with all these changes and all these attempts to try and remain relevant, and such as including best audience feature or whatever, or popular movie, what's your take on the relevance of the Oscars? Are they still relevant?
Oh, I actually wanted to. I mean, I just before we get into that, so I really felt like this little itch to say this. You were, and I understand where you're coming from, but when you say, like, I think it's a lack of respect that we're not showing the same interest for some of these other categories because they're not, they should be considered as important. I mean, I get from an artistic point of view, and from, like, if you're looking at it from someone who's really attached to the movie industry and who wants to put everyone in the same sort of level. I mean, I get that, but as a member of the audience who's looking to get entertained, no one really cares about. I mean, this is my opinion. I mean, it is what it is, but I don't think people really care about the technical categories. I think people are in it for the acting categories, the director and the best movie, documentary and
Screenplay.
And screenplay, sure, and even animated movie. I mean, and also, like, to a degree, we would also be part of the problem because those are exactly the categories that we often discuss when we're doing this podcast.
Yes.
And so I think that's also a reflection of, if you have an amount of time that you have to focus on something, you want to focus on the things that provide you the most juice, or the things that people want to hear opinions on, and all that stuff. So. Again, I do take your point, but I was just like, well, okay. I'll get it from a member of the audience. But on your point of, are the Oscars losing relevance? Maybe. I think the point that you raise about losing viewership is a reflection of that to a degree. I still think, for me, for instance, I like to use the Oscars, even if I get frustrated sometimes when I think a certain movie or a certain actor should have won or whatever, and they should have won and they didn't. I get frustrated and I say, these Oscars, they're worth for nothing. No one really cares about them. I make this really personal almost. But the fact is that, if I'm trying to pretty much make this movie bigger, if I'm having a discussion about a certain film, let's say in a conversation with you,
Mm-hmm.
and you say, that this movie even won the Oscar for best film. Benedict Cumberbatch won the Oscar for best actor, and I'll use those arguments to big it up, right? To give strength to my argument that movie is good. If you tell me that the movie is crap, I'm gonna say, dude, but come on, it won the Oscar. Fair enough. You can say, man, the Oscars are worth crap these days. No one cares about the Oscars. But I'll still feel like there is a level of relevance to the power that winning a statuette like the Oscar kind of brings to the table. But again, with all that said, I do feel like people are in some ways maybe losing a little bit of interest. I think this year in particular, you were saying, it was quite a quiet award season. I also think because the movies weren't as good. So there's lack of interest because the movies weren't great. There's no really strong characters out there, people who are controversial or have a big message to put out there. So I don't think there's any elements really that is bringing people to watch it. Even when we're talking about people hosting the Oscars, quite mild, right? And I think having a strong figure to host the Oscars is really an audience grabber. And we've been really lacking in that category for a couple of years, I think.
Well, yeah, we had that guy. What's the talk show host?
Fallon?
No, not Fallon. The other one from Jimmy Kimmel, and I really can't stand him
Kimmel,
as a
Kimmel.
host. And this year, I think like Wanda Sykes is super funny, and I think that she will be an amazing hostess. But I'm not sold on Amy Schumer. But that's it. Uh,
I don't
I
mind. I'm actually curious to see how the three of them work because I like all three of them. And actually, I haven't seen Amy Schumer do a bit of comedy in a while. I do like some of her work, and so I think it's going to be interesting to have that sort of trio partnership.
yes,
Um,
yeah. I mean, Regina Hall and Wanda Sykes, I would have loved to see them. Amy Schumer, I think, well, three's a crowd. But
yeah,
for example, I would love to see them maybe bring back Billy Crystal, who is and will always be a staple of the Oscars,
of
or
course.
the great Ricky Gervais. I mean, the man sure knows how to rile up a room. I still remember the 2020 Golden Globes. It's a clip, a YouTube clip that I like to revisit from time to time because I
He was
just like
great.
he was great, and I think that's the kind of like spike that the ceremony needs, or at least have multiple hosts. But yeah, they've been lacking that anchor, And even when they considered Eddie Murphy, then who was it? Kevin Hart, who had to bail out, some years ago at the last minute because of some controversy. And I think I agree with you. They've been lacking that strong anchor that makes you want to see it. That's the recurring presence that will make you endure every single category until you
And
get
it's
to the ones you want.
and it's great to have someone that's going to keep the guests on their toes. You know,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
you never know what they're going to say or what they're going to do. So
Hmm.
it would be great. I mean, I always thought that obviously you've mentioned Billy Crystal. I think Steve Martin and that lot. Some of
Hmm.
the older generation is
Hmm.
great. Kevin Hart would have been
Yeah.
amazing
Yeah.
to have on. And sometimes I even fantasize about, what would a guy like Jim Carrey do if he was ever given. I mean, I know it's not his thing. He's not done it, but I like to imagine what it would have been because he's so unpredictable and so funny and obviously so well connected in the industry because he knows
Yeah.
everyone. That
Yeah.
would have been so cool to see.
I mean, I agree with you. I think maybe it's because he's been out of the public eye recently or in recent years, but he's seems like he kind of lost his edge. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. He was good during the SNL bits last year, during his take on Joe Biden. But I mean, if you want to, you just need to look at his work as a host during the AFI ceremonies. They were brilliant, and I'm with you. This, of course, took place some years ago, so I don't know how he would work nowadays. But hey, maybe it's the comeback that we've all been waiting and expecting from Jim Carrey.
Well, he's putting out Sonic 2, so this would be
Oh
a way
yeah,
to
yeah,
plug in.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The great Sonic 2. I still haven't seen the first one, so I would be at a total loss. Um, but yeah, I'm with you. I think this year is not the right. I don't know, a good proxy for what's happening with the Oscars. They're going through a period of an existential crisis, if you will, And I think, like any award ceremony, there will always be criticism, and they will always use it as, oh, but this movie won all these Oscars, and therefore you should see it. And unfortunately, I think that argument would have only grown stronger if we didn't have COVID. We didn't have COVID in 2020, and we would actually been able to see a boost in ticket sales for Parasite, And I think that would have been an amazing case, which sadly didn't take place. I mean, there was a temporary boost, but not long enough because of what's wrong to mention boost and COVID in the same sentence without referring to the jabs. But yeah, I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. I think at the same time, the Oscars. they were a bit forced to open up not only to more mainstream options, and that's signaled by the fact that they went from 5 to 10 to then between 7 and 10 and now back to 10 movies, which is a bit unsure and all over the place. But they also had to learn to coexist alongside with or share the spotlight, if you will, with the likes of Venice and Cannes, like we just mentioned before. And I mean, let's see what they do with this new 10 slot approach.
But you know what? It's surprising because you're mentioning the how the Oscars are lackluster, not attracting the audiences, and how they went this mainstream route of having 10 movies in the category for Best Picture. But like you look at this year, for instance, and I know this is one of the subjects you're going to bring up. I mean, they've made a huge mistake because they could have actually, in my opinion, do something that would feel righteous, but also would actually work in their favor to bring in people, which is to bring something which would be seen as slightly outside the box. I'm thinking of two clear examples. I'm going to start with the lower degree one, which is with the less obvious one, which is if you had Nick Cage nominated for Best Actor, that would have given you an underdog to root for, and then a comeback story. And I think people really connect to that sort of thing, and I think it would grow interest. It would make people more interested in the Oscars because they would root for a character like Nick Cage. But this I'm not so attached to as an argument, let's say, because I think the biggest argument here is, you want to bring audiences and you want to have a movie that's done really well, you have to put in Spider-Man. I mean, I just thought, and I know you and I stand in very different places when it comes to comic book movies and all that stuff. But I do think that, to have 10 movies in one category and not have the biggest picture of the year, which was widely acclaimed by critics and audiences alike, just feels to me a wasted opportunity to restore some faith in the Oscars, bring back a wider audience, and just sort of try something different and show that you can actually be a little bit more fresh, a little bit more out there. I think.
Oh yeah, I mean, first of all, we may not see completely eye to eye when it comes to superhero movies, but I have to say, Spider-Man: No Way Home, I'll eventually watch it simply because there is a stronger attachment, and I think that's also part of why the movie was very successful, because it spanned across multiple generations, and I did. Grew up with, not grew up, but matured with the Tobey Maguire movies, right? I've seen all three in the big screen. I even went to see the first Andrew Garfield one. So as you can see, that there was a time where
surprise!
Yes, there you go. I can still surprise you.
Where did we lose you?
Around 2012, The Avengers. Yeah.
Okay.
That was it. That was the tipping point. But I did still go and see Man of Steel. So there you go. No, but the thing is, I completely agree. And I mean, there was. We have to. This is not a review of Spider-Man: No Way Home. I haven't seen it yet. But I agree with you. There was. Superhero movies were key to all these changes, right? They were when in 2008, The Dark Knight, which I elected my favorite movie of the year back in 2008, when it was snubbed by Best Picture, there was a massive outcry and outrage by the fans. And that motivated the Academy to expand to 10 nominated movies. And then there was the whole, they should nominate the Avengers, they should nominate this, they should nominate that. And then they finally did with Black Panther. It didn't win. But I think Spider-Man: No Way Home did something that, people were expecting Tenet to do in 2020, or at least, by people I mean Christopher Nolan, and maybe even to a certain extent Dune last year. But the real savior of the box office, the movie that brought people back after a massive pandemic was Spider-Man, right? And if they nominated a movie such as Avatar, which was a technical achievement, but well, it wasn't that great in terms of plot. I think there should also be room for a movie like Spider-Man: No Way Home. Even though I haven't seen it, I cannot vouch for it, but I read all the reviews, and I think that this movie may have saved a lot of movie theaters that were dying or close to being closed forever.
I truly thought it was great. I mean, honestly, and I consumed so many of these comic book
Mm-hmm.
films, and Um, I've loved a lot of them, and I remember like I had really strong feelings about Avengers Endgame when it came out, but I think that was more to do with the emotional connection because it was
Mm-hmm.
wrapping up all these years of film after film after film. I think actually when it comes to superhero movies, the one that left one of the biggest marks in recent times was Logan, which we know
Mm-hmm.
got a little nod in the Oscars for its screenplay. But I just think that Spider-Man did such a terrific job in terms of providing this balancing act between touching on your nostalgia, sort of like emotions, while also bringing you good acting, a great story, really convoluted story as well, because they're trying to fit in so many different characters, and they're kind of attached to a whole universe, right? So they have to
Mm-hmm.
be in they have to consider everything that's already happened and all these other movies that are coming out, and so it's this constant balancing act, and they really provide this finished product, which is really amazing. Such an experience. It's so rare that I get to go to the cinema and
Mm-hmm.
get people gasping and laughing and tears and wanting to clap at the end of the film. I know this is a very specific kind of audience, but again, even with all the comic book movies that I've seen in my lifetime, I've only seen this maybe two or three times.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was really great to see that. And again, I think it also provided me an amazing experience to continue this return to the cinemas, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so to not see it in the list of 10 movies
Yeah.
feels to me, very questionable to say the least.
Oh, I completely understand. I think everybody was expecting, that surprise nod. Then the other thing, I guess in 2009 it was different because Avatar, had there been only five nominees, Avatar would have made the list nonetheless. So I'm not sure if it was ever a serious contender, but it would have been nominated anyways. The next question is how many years can the Academy do? Let's say that Spider-Man was nominated for the 2022 Oscars, and let's say that the Batman got a nomination next year, and maybe in 2 years' time another movie would have been nominated, but they would never have a chance to win, right? Because with 10 movies, obviously the odds of those movies winning become lower than had they been nominated with just five or other four movies. Now, this is a question for you as a moviegoer and someone who enjoys these movies. Like, it would have been great to see a superhero movie nominated once, maybe twice, but then they would still not get a chance to win. Don't-
Sure. I mean, I get your point, and maybe you're right, but I think that there will probably be a little tendency for movies to be taken. I mean, it depends on who are you bringing into the academy as your
Mhm.
jury, right? But I would think that over time, you're getting younger generations, you're getting people who grew up watching these movies, and so maybe there will be more of a flexibility, I would say, to maybe consider some of these films. Because actually, when I look at all the movies that I saw last year, I've only rated two movies with 5 stars,
Mhm.
and one of them was Spider-Man.
Mhm.
And so like for me, there was no question about it. Spider-Man was by far the best movie that I saw last year. Actually, I might have also given Dune a 5 star because I just thought it was such a great experience as well.
Mhm.
And I thought that movie had so much on too because you would have the first David Lynch version, which critically didn't do that well. I mean, I know it's a cult film now, but at the
Ah,
time, But at the time, it was very criticized, and people who had read the book also had lots of stuff to say. And so, there was a lot of writing in this film to the point where Denis Villeneuve, I'm not sure if I butchered his name, but the direct, but the director essentially, wasn't too sure whether or not a sequel would happen because he would also have to wait for box office returns. And everything kind of paid off, and it was a huge success, and it was such a great film, and it was one of the best things I saw last year. But I would hope that maybe you would have a younger, fresher, more open-minded batch of juries moving forward, and maybe they could look into a movie and say, you know what, so and so was the better movie. Yes, it's a comic book movie, but it ticks all the boxes and it did really well. And sometimes it's good, if you're between two movies, maybe I'm going to say something controversial, but if you're in between two movies and you don't know really what to pick, sometimes it's good to kind of like shake the feathers a little bit and go for the outsider, just have something for people to talk about the next day. Again, if you're really not sure of which one to vote for, if there's a clear winner, then go for the clear winner. I'm just saying if you're in between.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I agree with your point. Just to keep you honest, I had your Letterboxd profile here on the many tabs that I have open in preparation for this talk, and you awarded Dune 4.5 stars. You did award another movie 5 stars, and that was something that a movie that you recommended, but I have yet to watch. And that movie was Boiling Point.
Yes, I loved Boiling Point, but the Boiling Point, I totally I'm not going to sell it. I'm not going to come out and say, how are the Oscars not putting this movie in the category for Best Picture? How is this movie not, I get it. It's a low tier sort of smaller in scale independent film made here in England, and so I get all of that. I just think that I gave it a 5-star because also it was the element of surprise. It was a movie that I had very low expectations. It's a movie filmed in one take. The movie takes about 1 hour and 30 minutes, maybe even less, and has great performances by a bunch of actors that I had never heard of, except from Stephen Graham, who I think is a formidable actor. I think I have a man crush on this guy because everything he seems to do is really good, and I've started to see him doing lots of stuff. I started watching Boardwalk Empire not long ago, where he does Al Capone. I started watching. I saw a BBC show called Time, in which he plays a prison guard, and he is, I just want to use curse words to emphasize how good he is, because he is so good. He is so good, and that was one of the best shows I've seen. So everything that I feel like he touches is turning into gold. He's always very intense. He always does a little bit. He always has a little bit of darkness into him, but he truly delivers. And Boiling Point was such a terrific surprise. But I think the 5 stars behind it was also because it caught me by surprise, and I want people to watch it. It's a movie that I'm pushing people to see it. But if I'm telling you to go to the cinema watch a movie, I'm going to tell you to go watch Dune.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
You're not going to sell me on Boiling Point, but I will have to see it because I am curious. I am curious to see that one. And I think this is a perfect segue to align our picks and our recommendations and review the 10 nominated films for the 2022 Oscars. And I guess we can start alphabetically with Belfast. Your thoughts on this one?
I thought it was good. I didn't think it was amazing. I went in with really high expectations. I think I usually get stuck if there's a moment or two that I just don't really buy into it. Those moments can often ruin a film for me. I'll never forget, for instance, watching Django Unchained, for instance. I think it was one of the primary examples. Loving it for the first 2 hours. And then I saw one or two things that I considered to be big mistakes, and it ruined the rest of the film for me. Because I just couldn't, because it just got me in such a down, such a negative mood that I just couldn't get past it. And so it ruined the film for me. It was one of those movies that as it was going, it was ranking up high in my favorite Tarantino movies, and then it ended up being one of the bottom of the list. And with Belfast, I think I had 2 or 3 scenes, 2 of which take place during the riots, and then a scene that takes place afterward. and I was just like, I just think this is so dumb. I don't like it, and I understand there's a lot of it that's highly romanticized.
Hmm.
It's meant to be light. It's meant to be, this whole coming of age thing, and I get it. Like I haven't missed the point. It just hasn't resonated as much with me as it has with other audiences.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would say that I thought it was a good film. I'm not taking away credit. I just didn't think it was as stupendous as a lot of people were claiming it to be.
Hmm. I mean, I get your point, right? I think it's a heartwarming movie with a great story, and I think some of those flaws. I know one of the scenes that you didn't care for. I believe it was the dancing one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, I remember you telling me that, and I think all those things. I mean, you're just not mellowed out, but you're taken into a journey with and surrounded by such great performances that for me, I mean, the flaws were excusable. It ranked high on my list for my top 10 of 2021.
I remember. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember. I think one of the reasons why I was so hyped to see this movie was because your reaction to it was very, very positive, and
so
so I
so,
was
so,
just
so my credibility went out the window after you've
no,
seen
of
it.
course not. Man, I really care about what you say. I mean, we often disagree, but
Yes.
I really
Yes.
respect your opinion, and I love sort of getting getting the chance to learn from you and also have these discussions as well, because I think often
Hmm.
even when we disagree and we're exchanging arguments, I might really stick to what I'm saying and get really
Hmm.
heated, but actually I'm taking everything that you're saying on board, and I feel like there's a learning process there, or I'm considering
It's
things I did
mutual.
before.
It's mutual. It's mutual. No, I mean, I get your point on this one, and I think there was, and there are a lot of expectations, but I don't know. I think this movie actually, I don't think it no longer has a chance of winning, especially after missing some critical nominations, such as editing and cinematography. Which, I mean, a lot of people that are not like they don't pay attention to that. They complain to me and say, "Ah, Pedro, like the black and white usage. I don't know. It felt a bit forced or unnatural." And these are people that are casual moviegoers, but they picked up on that. So I guess the Academy did too. But this is a movie that I think, in light of current events, and I'm talking specifically about Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. I mean, sadly, it's obviously like they're both tragedies and not ideal well, less than ideal situations. But I mean, it became a bit more relevant. I don't know. Had you seen the movie now? Well, we can we can talk about this until forever. But I don't know. Maybe even seeing the movie now, you'll have a different perspective. Or if you get to see it for the first time under these circumstances, you'll get a different view, or maybe not.
I mean, honestly, I don't know if it would have changed anything. I haven't
Hmm.
really made the connection like you're doing it right now.
Hmm.
And to be honest, I think I would always get to those little bits over there. Again, even if they're meant to be uplifting, I mean, even if it's a kind of movie that you almost need during a time like this, because you need to lighten up the mood, you need to see something that restores some hope and gives you some perspective in the world and whatnot. I just don't think, I would look at it in a very pragmatic way, particularly if I was hit sideways by stuff that I was really annoyed with. And you mentioned the dancing scene, but the scenes in the riot, which is meant to be a heavy hitting scene, really,
Hmm.
I just thought it was so ludicrous that, and again, even if it was a cartoon, I would just think that like, this is stupid. I'm not buying into this, and I don't want to. And that really pissed me off so much that I didn't come close to giving up, but it annoyed me. But there were other things that I really appreciated. Some of the supporting acting was great. I mean, all the acting was great. To be fair, I thought it was great. I love the fact that it was shot in black and white. I know you were mentioning this before, and I
Hmm.
always think it's such a good thing to see because it's so rare nowadays. And you had the tragedy of Macbeth, who also did that
Hmm.
choice in style. Aesthetically, I think it looks gorgeous. And, it's also endearing to think that the director, Kenneth Branagh, was also pouring his heart out in terms of,
Hmm.
his own experience as a little boy. So all these things are taken into account. And and that's why I can say like it's a good movie. And if people say to me, should I watch it? I'll be like, I mean, I won't be pushing you to watch. I don't think you desperately need to watch it,
Mm-hmm.
but I would probably tell you that you're better watching Belfast than you are looking at or watching Don't Look Up, for instance.
Mm-hmm. 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 Fair enough. Yeah, no, I see your point. I mean, for the sake of time, we will move on to the second movie alphabetically, and that's Coda. I haven't seen this one yet. I know it says no, no, I haven't.
I know you haven't.
If you're laughing because of our mutual friend who hated this movie, I haven't been persuaded by his negative remarks. But I know it has been gaining some steam, especially after nabbing the SAG award for Best Ensemble Cast. So I'm gonna leave it to you because I know you really like this one, and I'd
And
love to hear your take.
Troy won the BAFTA, right? He won the BAFTA for in the acting category as well, I think.
Yes, yes, yes.
He was great. I mean, listen, I really enjoyed this film, and actually, I think this mutual friend that you were just mentioning, I think he did wonders for me for this film because he trashed this film so much, so hard that I mean, I just thought it must be really terrible. And the only reason why I still pushed myself to see it was because it was getting some traction in terms of awards and nominations. But even before that, I was like, dude, how is this trashy movie get this really high score on IMDb and on Rotten Tomatoes? I mean, the reviews were just so good. So I was like, man, I need to check this out for myself and make my own opinion or get my own opinion. And I had a blast. I mean, it was so sweet, so endearing, so well acted. To think that this was a remake of a French film, which on its own, I mean, if I had known this as well before coming into this film, that would also been a massive turnoff because
Mm-hmm.
I really hate when the Americans decide to remake something that's been done in another language. More often than not, they really screw it up. I mean, I can't even begin to give you the amount of examples that I've seen that they really trashed something that was amazing and never needed to exist other than its original form. I always think of Old Boy as like my number one example because I was so disappointed when I saw Spike Lee's version. I remember also Les Intouchables
Oh yeah, I
when
was
you had
about to say that one.
when you had Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart going at it, and I was like, "Wow, these two guys are so talented," but they really sucked
Yeah.
doing this. The whole thing was just terrible. But I mean, listen, there's lots of other films, and in this one, I really saw some sort of a great example that I can use where actually, you know what, it kind of works. I haven't seen the original one, I haven't seen the French version, but I have spoken to a couple of people who have, and most of them either didn't like it or said that it was an okay film. It was an okay
Mm-hmm.
film. I know it was very popular in France at the time when it came out, but it didn't do really well in terms of reviews, if I'm not mistaken. And this one just like was off the charts. So I was really happy to feel that once I had seen the movie and that I was in agreement. I agreed with everything that I had seen and heard through the grapevine and through these mainstream sort of platforms such as Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. I've engaged in this conversation with our mutual friend once again a few times, and he gets upset just talking about it, like he lost his job or like he's lost a close relative, and I get it. I get passionate about these things too, but man, I had a really good time watching this film, and I would definitely recommend to anyone who wants to see something light and sweet. I laughed, I cried, I had a great time watching it.
Man, you've convinced me. Our mutual friend, who shall remain nameless until I tag him on this post, on the post to promote this episode. He also told me not to watch it, but I will. I will give it a go. And speaking of crying, we have the third movie on the list, Don't Look Up. And I mean, I could dedicate a whole episode to this movie, but I won't. And to honor Paul Thomas Anderson, triple nominee this year, I'm going to use the words he recommended people to use when they don't like something. Just say this movie, it wasn't for me. And
Yeah.
and I'm gonna leave it at that. But please, I've seen it, but yeah, I'm gonna let you cover this one.
I mean, listen, I think so. Both of us really agree on this. Well, actually, hold on. No, we don't fully agree. I don't hate it. I just think it was an average movie. I don't think it ever deserved to be nominated for Best Picture. I think I'm going to really. Usually, I actually tend to stand more with the big audiences than I stand with the critics. But actually, I'm going to agree with the critics. I think the overwhelm, well, not the overwhelm, but it was very mixed reviews, right? On Rotten Tomatoes, I had about 50%, give or take.
Hmm.
And for me, that's not really a good reflection. If I see a movie that's ranking on the 50% mark, for me, I'm not going to watch it,
Hmm.
because it must be crap. And I don't think this was crap at all. I think it had really poignant topics, and I think it's relevant in today's day and age in many ways. But it's as relevant as SNL is every single week. Like SNL is putting out content every single week that does social satire, that picks on important subjects within the realms of politics, climate change, and all that. And I just don't think this movie in particular was adding anything new to the conversation. And so that's why for me it was just like, yeah, it's okay. Like I didn't think it was a waste of time watching it. I just don't think what the fuss is all about.
I agree with you on that. And let's just say that speaking of disaster movies, this one being a bit more on the comedy side, but I think this movie will make as much for global warming as the Towering Inferno did for California zoning construction limitations. But and this is me being polite. You cannot see my face, but I'm doing that usual face when I'm
I can
putting
imagine the face. I can see the face.
sarcasm to the max. And I agree with the fact that this is what SNL has been doing. And in fact, 2 days ago, I was watching a bit of, Anchorman. It was on TV. And I was looking at it and this is Adam McKay doing funny, smart, and interesting, satire. It may not be, super cerebral, but it is. It's mocking the news and the media establishment and
Mhm.
in a funny way. By using stereotypes and whatnot, but this movie I can't really begin to describe the bit of frustration that I have. But and this may sound like or seem like a paradox. I'm actually happy that this movie was nominated because well, since we don't have any other movies with that mainstream appeal, and apparently everybody and their dog watched Don't Look Up, I think this is actually a movie that people can root for. And I know that the audiences really went crazy for this movie because I guess it made them feel smart, and it was very clear that these are the bad guys. So it's very traditional in that sense, and I just think that people, if there is a movie that they want to root for and a movie that could drive audiences and raise the profile of the awards, this is it, right? So
It's funny because it also touches on two different types of audiences. Like for instance, we see these two groups. I'm going to narrow it down to one subject, but I think it goes a long way to other different topics. Like putting two groups, one that believes in the vaccines and the other one that doesn't. And both those groups watching this film will make different interpretations, and they will use this film to justify their concerns and their reasoning behind why they do believe in something or why they don't believe in something. Because this particular film has that ability, I guess, to shapeshift and be used as something to give more power to your arguments within a subject when you're criticizing the establishment or when you're actually trying to also have a better understanding of the work that people are trying
Hmm.
put out there, like behind the science and all that.
Hmm.
It's kind of complicated for me to now make any sense of this. I just know there was this really interesting parallel that I kept thinking when I was discussing this movie with people who have very different ideas and beliefs from mine, because I thought this movie would be a good way of pointing the finger at them, and actually they were using this movie to point the finger at me.
Wow, that sounds like all the internet fight that I read about this movie. Um,
Precisely.
yeah, but this is if you're against this movie, then you're part of the problem.
Uh-huh.
And it's a very polarizing movie, right?
And
It almost sounds like all those people that were criticizing the Christopher Nolan movies. They went to see the new Batman, and now Christopher Nolan sucks. That was kind of a battle that was recently going on. But I guess before that, we had that kind of like angle, and a lot of people on social media that are not vocal about movies at all. They were just kind of like, "This was brilliant, and if you don't like it, then you are the problem." Okay, then I guess I am, and we'll move on. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this it may have been the movie that unleashed the most emotional responses this year. Maybe I don't know, but I think it was, and from the fast pace and linear narrative of Don't Look Up, we arrived to a more art house indie approach, and that's Drive My Car. Hamaguchi's Drive My Car. And we were supposed to see this movie together, I think, but we didn't. We ended up not seeing it. And I mean, what was your impression of this
I
movie?
I feel like I really missed out on not watching this movie with you, because I would have really loved to leave that room and have an in-depth conversation about it. This movie stirred up a lot of different emotions in me. I guess one of the things that I thought was that I mean, I knew nothing about this film when I went into the cinema, and so I kept being constantly surprised by every twist and turn, by every development, and not only within the narrative, but also within each of these characters that I started falling in love with. And it's such a special, unique film. I don't think haven't seen anything like it in the last couple of years. And I have to say, when I left the room, I thought to myself, you know what? This is a great film. A bit long, I thought. I felt. I said to myself, this could have wasted. This could have lost 20 to 30 minutes, perhaps,
Hmm.
because I thought at points was a bit prolonged and a bit indulgent. But I thought to myself, you know what? It was a great film, a bit too long, but I don't know if it stirred up the right emotions that I was expecting.
Hmm.
I mean, I had maybe one or two scenes where I cried, but I never, the movie was almost sort of like begging for you to have this really emotional moment of wrecking. And I'm someone who is very emotional. I'm very sensitive, and I cry very easily. And so for me, I'm surprised at myself by thinking, why haven't I lost it? Why am I not? What is this movie not doing to me that should be doing, right? And I often think like that because I'm trying to see which emotions are these pictures tapping into. But interestingly enough, the more I thought about this movie, and the longer, the days that went after I saw this, the better I digested it, and the more I fell in love with it. It's one of those films that got better by each day that went by, and I got to think about it. And in my commutes, to central London or whatever, I would often put up the soundtrack, which I thought was beautiful.
Hmm.
And each track would bring me to a particular scene, or just, would raise another, would make me sort of like replay something that I had seen before. And I guess the overall feeling that I have is that this is the biggest, best surprise of the year. I was really, really pleasantly surprised would Drive My Car. And it's definitely
Hmm.
one of those movies that I would absolutely recommend, because it makes you wonder and think about different things about life in particular, and
Hmm.
in certain things that you can't even relate to because you've not been through it yourself. But in some ways, you do this exercise of trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes,
Hmm.
and that movie really makes a great job. Like, does a really good job at trying to bring you in to all these different scenes
Hmm.
and feel things and experience things differently.
Hmm. I mean, 100%, 200% agree with you. Yes, it was a labor of love, and it's not an easy watch considering not only the slow pace but the length. It clocks in at 3 hours or 2 hours and
Yeah,
59 minutes.
yeah.
And then you have the whole the mix of emotions and topics it deals with. We're talking about art, creating art, making art. Then there's love, loss, marriage, grief, driving a car in Japan, everything, turned into a mix. And then there's the soundtrack, which was again beautiful. I also have it and play play on Spotify recurrently. And beyond that, I mean, it's a beautiful adaptation from a short story, and Hamaguchi managed to create something terrific. And I don't know if this is the Parasite effect, but the nominations on not only international feature but also screenplay, best picture, best director. I mean, it's amazing. And you also need to take into account that this movie can be seen as a case study for art house or indie gambles by larger studios, because it actually, I think it was in a month and a half, and playing in just 150 screens in the US, it managed to generate 1 million in revenues.
Wow.
I don't know the budget, so I don't know if this is like, okay, what's the whole what's the impact against the budget. But even during, I think, 2.5 months in the US, 2 million, 4 million in total. And I mean, you're talking about a 3 hour movie that otherwise wouldn't come nowhere near, without any stars or without any blockbuster, motif behind it. Those kind of movies will never come close to 4 million. So this is just a highlight. I love the numbers as well, but this, I think, it's very important because it is a testament to the power of the movie.
Agree. Totally
Hmm.
agree with you.
Hmm. And from smaller scale, we go straight to big scale with Dune, right? The 10th or the blockbuster slot in the 10 movies nominated. I mean, I went to see this movie with you. I had high hopes for it, and it did not disappoint. And kudos to Denis Villeneuve, because he adapted what was considered for many years an unfilmable book. I think it's a magnificent work of art. I'm not going to single out performances, but from a technical and visual standpoint, the superb soundtrack by Hans Zimmer, right, and even the creative ambition to split such a long book into two movies, I think really speaks volumes about Dune. And I mean, your take on this one?
No, listen, I enjoy listening to you talk about it because obviously I see, honestly, I see you're very passionate about it. I remember going into this that you had a really high expectations in terms of,
Yeah.
wanting to see what this movie would come out, how this movie would come out. And, I agree with every single point that you said. And, I think you kind of like dodged talking about performances there. I mean, there's not really any outstanding performances. I don't think the
Hmm.
movie is done to sort of in like to provide you a stellar performance. I think everyone really works well together. I think in the back of my mind, the only thing that I would say, but this is as someone who has not read the book, is that Chalamet for me looks very boyish. I just don't believe him. I just don't believe in him to be this
Hmm.
great warrior and to be in the battlefield and kick some ass. That
Hmm.
which we see quite a lot in the film, and that's what you're expected to believe. I love him as an actor. I liked him in that role. But it's always great to see him on screen. I think, speaking as a fan, but I don't know how this character was developed in the book. If it was meant to be this young and this fragile looking, because he is quite thin. He's quite, he looks like a gust of wind will blow him away. But even that didn't bother me at all. That's just like
Hmm.
a side remark that I'm doing. It didn't take away from me enjoying any of the movie's narrative. I absolutely had an amazing time. We watched it in the big screen. It was an IMAX experience,
Hmm.
and Gali was such a great day to be out and see that magnificent film in the big screen.
Hmm.
And so, out of every movie that we have on the list that we've mentioned and the ones that we're about to mention later on, I think it's one of the few that I would say this is a must. This
Hmm.
is like you cannot go away from last year or this coming year and not see this movie. And particularly if you have a chance to see it in the big screen, you need to go for it.
Yeah, I couldn't reinforce that message anymore. And just to answer your question, so Paul Atreides, the character played by Timothée Chalamet, he was 15 or 16, I don't recall. But yeah, I'm with you. Like both Kyle MacLachlan and Timothée Chalamet were already way too old to play the character. Luckily they look young enough to be 15 or 16. Now, when it comes to the whole description of the fragile thing that you mentioned, that's an interesting point because I've that didn't bother me. I was aware of the age situation, but that didn't bother me at all. But now maybe I need to reflect on how I pictured Paul Atreides to be in the book when I read it, and if it matches the Chalamet interpretation. And from the sands of Dune, we go straight to the courts, to King Richard. Right, this is one that I haven't seen. So over to you.
Well, King Richard for me, I really enjoyed watching it because I thought it was one of those uplifting stories, of going against the odds and you know just attaining this level of success when everything is going up against you. And again, I'm sort of like repeating myself, going up against the odds. Um, and it's a story that in many ways some people now might be familiar with. But what I would say, and this is the bit in me that gets really annoyed, is that you'll probably come away from the movie and you'll still won't know parts of the real story because they just don't tell it. My big issue with this film is that they play Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena, to be this outstanding,
Hmm.
amazing sort of like father of the year kind of
Hmm.
character,
Hmm.
and he's everything but. He's someone that's been depicted even by himself on his own account in his own book as being a very difficult man who's abandoned um, other families. Let's put it like that. No, right? Because he's been married more than once, if I'm not mistaken, and or been in another relationship where he's had other children, and so he's turned his back on them to focus on Venus and Serena, and to put them at that elite level of tennis playing.
Hmm.
Um, Even the way that he's brought these girls up is, by all accounts, questionable by many. I know that Serena and Venus have a very special relationship with their dad. At least that's what comes across when you hear these interviews and when you see their interactions and whatnot. You know, to a degree, I can't really blame them because obviously they're masters at their sport. They've
Hmm.
reached a level of celebrity and fame that has given them a lot of privilege and comfort.
Hmm.
Particularly when you take into account that they came from a very unprivileged background and they had to really struggle to make to reach the level of success they have. Forget the fact that they came from a poor place. They're black, they're women, so everything's sort of like stacked up against them. But I think when the stories of how Richard Williams brought up his kids, even though the results are there, it could have gone either way. I mean, it could have been really bad. And so I don't think the movie really does justice in portraying this accurately because the movie really just shows him as being pushy. Yeah, but pushy doesn't really cut it. He was a bully. He was really tough. He's placed these really young girls in really horrific situations. Has it made them tough? Of course it has. You can see it on the court. You see it in life, but again, it could have been really bad. And so I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to go and I don't want to critique or pass judgments more than I already have in some ways. of his parenting ability, because that doesn't matter for what we're talking. I just think that I would want to see that reflected in the film because that would be the true story. I don't want this to be sugar coated. I don't want to hear this Walt Disney fairy tale if it doesn't correspond to the actual truth. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, knowing the story, that's what upset me. If I had no idea, if this was based on a fictional story, I would have loved it. But knowing that this was based on a true story and I know some of the inner details, I just
Mm-hmm.
think it kind of really annoys me.
And I think we can revisit this because I was about to ask you how does that, or knowing that or feeling that, impacts your thought on Will Smith's performance. I mean, he's been making rounds, winning all the major awards.
I mean, he's great.
It
He's
is,
just he's
despite not being an accurate portrayal, that's not his fault, and it isn't
no,
because he didn't write the screenplay. So.
exactly, it isn't. And in the same way about the film, if I'm trying to be as pragmatic as I can, and just forget the whole backstory that I'm aware of, it's a good film. Is it a winning picture? No, hell no. It's
Hmm.
um it's a solid good film. It's in many ways it's kind of formulaic, right? Because we've seen this story told many times before.
Hmm.
But there's moments of really genuine tenderness and just great acting. I mean, this is one of those films that is really lifted by the really good casting. And
Hmm.
I'm not just referring to Will Smith in particular, although he is by far the biggest star and the best performer. But you have supporting actresses at a different level. The girls who play Venus and Serena are great.
Hmm.
The woman that plays um, Will Smith's wife in the film, she's also terrific. I thought. So I mean, it's a film that I think people would enjoy watching for sure, and mostly to do with the fact that um, Will Smith does such a great job at
Hmm.
delivering that epic sort of character.
Hmm. Hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, you know where I stand about the biopics, and also the fact that I'm not the biggest tennis fan. I know this shouldn't stand in the way, but that's probably what kept me from seeing this movie. And also your comment about actually not being very accurate or a good portrayal of the truth. But I may give it a go because Will Smith is always like, whenever he's doing the serious bit, not the blockbuster type bit, I always find him delivering very good performances. And I guess, yeah, it's interesting, an interesting take, and perhaps now you told me that Belfast elevated my expectation, your expectations of the movie. I think King Richard, when you told me about, well, it actually wasn't the truth because this and this, I was kind of like, oh man, no, it's gone to the bottom of my list, but maybe I'll check it out. And I guess another movie that has suffered a bit of controversy, not a lot, but some, was our next entry, Licorice Pizza, right? Paul Thomas Anderson's latest film.
Why? Why?
Well, why? Well, first of all, you had the depiction of an Asian, well, that guy who owns the restaurant, the Japanese
Yeah.
restaurant. Yeah, you find it funny, and I do too. But yeah, but people were like, "Oh, yes, it is funny." But still, a lot of people, apparently, the film Twitter crowd was pretty upset with that. And then we have something that I asked you, and apparently it was only impacted, funnily enough, female viewers, or at least from the everybody that I spoke with, only the female viewers complained about the age difference, the character's age difference, as a big issue, and that's something that for them it ruined the movie.
I mean, I would never. I mean, okay, so talking, starting with the first point. I mean, that scene. I mean,
It's funny as hell.
it's very funny. I mean, it's very racist, but that's the point.
Yeah.
But that's the point. It's to point out the stupidity. I mean, that character, he's a
Mhm.
moron. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's the way he's meant to be perceived, and that's why he ends up doing this moronic thing. So I don't think it's like, P.T. Anderson is not trying to pass that on as something that you would accept as normal.
Hmm.
Everyone looking at it is thinking this guy is a jackass. I mean, it's
Yeah.
funny, but it's like seeing just any stand-up comedian do something slightly inappropriate or stereotypes, whatever. I mean, there are things that can be very tricky grounds, and I get that. I don't necessarily see this as an issue, particularly because it is really taking the stance of this is satire and
Yeah.
this is meant to actually point the finger at people such as this character who are idiots. It's meant to rally us all together and say that guy's an idiot. So I so I thought it was great. I laughed my ass off at the
Yeah.
cinema, and I
So
thought it
did
was
I.
fantastic. And as far as the depiction of that relationship of uh, uh, um, an older woman, or well, she's not that old really. I mean,
No.
it's basically like a teenager with a preteen sort of thing, right?
Well, she's 25 and he's 16.
Okay,
So.
she's a young adult, so it's a young adult with a teenager.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'll admit, I was that was one of the things I pointed out when the movie was over. It felt odd to me. I don't know why, particularly as as far as my understanding goes. I'm not calling myself a woman expert here,
Hmm.
in the sense of what they deem to be a respectable partner or not. But in life, most of my friends within my circle, the women usually tend to date older men because they have very little patience for juveniles.
Hmm.
And so to see a character so in tune, so in touch, so connected to this very young boy just feels odd because it's something that I don't know. I've never seen that. I mean, it's usually the other way around. I always see older guys with much younger women
Yeah.
in different stages of life. I'm not talking about just when you're an adult, even, when you're like 18 and you're hanging out with a girl who's 14 or whatever.
Hmm.
That's something that just feels a little bit more common to me. Um, but, I guess the beauty of it, the reason why I kind of sort of like closed my eyes to all of that was because their chemistry was great. Great. The acting was great. Alana Haim was she was terrific. She was such a
Yeah.
surprise, like a gem. And Seymour Hoffman's kid. I mean, I don't want to refer to him after
Yeah.
this particular movie as Seymour Hoffman's kid because I want him to be on his own.
Yeah.
Uh, and he did such a great job in this film that I just thought to myself, you know what? I can't wait to see what these guys do next.
I'm with you. It was one of those movies that I had high hopes that I waited quite a long time to see, and then I finally had the pleasure to see it on the big screen, and it was such a great thrill. Especially I got to see it. Well, you know exactly where the my old neighborhood cinema where I used to go when I was a kid and where I started to go to the movies. So it had something special, watching that specific movie on that environment, and I think it contributed. But I guess had I seen it elsewhere, the impact would have been very similar in terms of how great the movie is. I also think it's Paul Thomas Anderson's lightest and most engaging and perhaps his most successful movie yet. Let's see what he comes up with next. And I mean, now he's just one of those, kind of like the Martin Scorsese of the Oscars. He's been nominated 11 times without ever winning, in across different categories, and I don't know, maybe this year best original screenplay. Although I'm rooting for the, like, I would like to see him win, a triple or a clean sweep, best movie director screenplay one day. But
I, I can't wait to see him win because I think he's just a fascinating filmmaker.
yeah.
Everything that he does is so good. I mean, I lost count of these films that he's done over the years that's really left a mark in me. I just never leave a room indifferent. I always
Hmm.
carry his
Hmm.
movies throughout time, even something as slow paced as it was with the Phantom Thread, for instance.
Hmm.
I just thought it was so good, and you can't say it's a movie that Daniel Day Lewis carried it. No, I mean everyone in that film, every single element of that film was terrific, and
Yeah.
I felt the same way about this one. Even the small cameos, Bradley Cooper was just really amazing. Tom Waits as well,
Fun
Sean
fan.
Penn. I loved as a kid. I really liked this kid. I've only seen him maybe in one or two movies. His name is Skylar Dizondo, I think. He plays this arrogant, cocky guy
Yeah,
that
yeah,
goes
yeah.
against Cooper Hoffman's character, and I just thought he was really nice as well. So fun to watch. I mean, Licorice Pizza really, it's such a fresh film, and particularly when you look at the movies that we've seen succeed in the Oscar nominations this year. A lot of them are remakes. You look at Dune, remake, Nightmare Alley, another remake, Tragedy. Macbeth is sort of a remake. It's a
Hmm.
story that we've seen so many times before. Coda as well, West Side Story. I mean, so you just have all of these films that are just stories that we've heard before told differently. And here it just, even if at heart it's still a coming of age romance, it just feels fresh. It just feels like it's something that you're really going to have a good time watching it with
Hmm.
lots of pop culture references and all that. And I just had a lot of fun watching it. And so, going back to the 2 points that you were saying that made them controversial, I mean, honestly, when a movie is this good and brings so much to the table, I can't even find space and time to consider those things as flaws or something that would raise any debate over controversy because, man, it's just a great film. Enjoy it for what it is.
I'm with you, and that's exactly what I did. No, it's true, man, and I will need to rewatch it soon. We moved to Nightmare Alley again. This is the first of two remakes or readaptations on this list. I did read the book and I did watch the original movie. I'm always a bit, biased towards Guillermo del Toro. I'm not his biggest fan, and I was put away a bit by this movie. But I know you've seen it, and yeah, I mean, it's your take on this one. What do you think?
It was one of my favorite films and probably one of the bigger surprises. I mean, I wouldn't say. I mean, I think Drive My Car is by far the biggest surprise that I had looking at all these films, and I was surprised by quite a few. Coda was again a lovely surprise. We've mentioned this, but Nightmare Alley. I don't know what surprised me about it in the sense of what sort of expectation I had coming into this. Maybe because you had mentioned that there was this original film that
Hmm.
you really took into account as being a great classic, and you were really sort of skeptical about how this film
Hmm.
would ever surpass that, and in particular because you didn't really like Guillermo del Toro. And to be honest, I'll say this: I respect Guillermo del Toro. I think he's a really good filmmaker, but the last two films that he's done, or some of his last films that he's done, have not were really underwhelming. I didn't like Shape of Water. I thought it was a huge
Hmm.
disappointment, particularly given all the praise that it got. I couldn't really understand why. Um, Maybe I felt a little bit maybe like our mutual friend felt when he watched Coda. Maybe not as much because I didn't want to smash things, but like I was still surprised by it. And then the other elements, um, sorry, I sort of got lost thinking about the idea of some of these other films that Guillermo del Toro has done because the other one was what the one with the not the robots, but those big machines.
Yeah, Pacific
Oh,
Rim.
Pacific Rim, Pacific Rim. What a, well, I mean, I'm just really trying to avoid using curse words here, but what a load of crap. And I just really hated it so much. I watched it in the cinema, and I just couldn't wait to get out of the room. When I was watching it, so it was such a pathetic film. But anyway, I went into this, watched it, and I had such a blast watching it. It's a crescendo kind of thing. It kind of builds up on this main character, of course, played by Bradley Cooper, who, by the way, I thought was really amazing. And then his interactions with some of the other characters, from Willem Dafoe to Rooney Mara and Kate Blanchett, who I thought was such a fantastic femme fatale. She was really terrific, and the tension that was built throughout, leading up to this climax,
Hmm.
it just really got me gripped. I mean, I just couldn't. I gasped a few times. I was really like, I just, if you were to try to interrupt me from watching that film, particularly within the last 30 minutes, I would lose my temper just because I just didn't want anything to interrupt that amazing experience that I was having. And so, I think it's a hard watch just a level or two. I guess when you're thinking about people who have a hard time dealing with anxiety,
Hmm.
this film will bring your levels of anxiety up. And I do believe that they've made a couple of tweaks to its original script. I think they've made some changes in the story. I can't remember exactly what that was. I remember I tried to sort of hint you of it when I finished watching the movie. I said, Peter, you need to watch this one because it's slightly different from what you've seen,
Hmm.
and I think you'll appreciate the changes because I think we're for the better. I love when that happens. I love when someone takes an original film and makes a couple of tweaks that might be a bit risque.
Yeah. Make it
You
their
know, I
own. Make it their own.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we've seen this with West Side Story this year. Spielberg really took a chance and made some really um, sort of uh, crucial tweaks. Not crucial in the sense that they were needed. They were not needed, but crucial tweaks that in the sense that they really changed what was meant to be from the movie years ago. And so that's a great example. Another great example that I always think of, and I don't know if you've seen this movie, is a movie called The Mist, which
Yes.
was directed by Frank Darabont and inspired or adapted from
The Stephen
a
King
novel
novel.
by Stephen King novel.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the Darabont just decided to change the ending entirely, and it was such a bold move to make, particularly because Stephen King doesn't really love when people tamper too much with his work. We've seen that with The Shining and all that.
Yes. Yes.
And with The Mist, I remember Stephen King came out and said, "Man, that was genius what he did. I wish I came up with that idea, And it truly was. It was such a great, bold decision, but it was great. And so I think just by reading the differences between the original of The Nightmare Alley and this new version,
Hmm.
I just think that the decision was also kind of bold, and I think you might have appreciated it
Okay.
as a fan of the original. But yeah, but just to wrap it up, I really think it's a great movie. I think you should really watch it. I was pending. It was one of those films where I probably gave it a 4.5 stars, but I was pending towards the five. It's hard for me to give it a 5 stars,
Yeah.
just about any movie. But the experience that it provided me to a degree felt like one actually.
Okay. That's a good sale. I don't think I have ever talked to you about this particular movie, at least not on this level of detail. And I think we can jump right to actually the West Side Story, because you mentioned that there were also some tweaks. Now, this is different than Nightmare Alley. I think West Side Story for me was a movie or a story that didn't need retelling, right? And that's what kept me off. Also, I don't know how well Spielberg could do a musical, and I've seen Jersey Boys directed by Clint Eastwood, so I was a bit, scolded from that experience.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, what you mentioned that, and I did watch the 1961 version of West Side Story. So what was so different about this one? And I'm asking this not in an arrogant standpoint, but what did you mention? He took some chances. What are the differences?
Well, I mean, you had a couple of things where, for instance, first of all, in terms of the casting, right? The fact that he
Yes.
decided to go for
Yes.
like a Latin American cast to portray a lot of these roles. There was a lot more diversification, which was great. Some of the artistic choices that he took by having a lot of the dialogues being spoken in Spanish without any subtitles.
Hmm.
Um, the fact that he was able to change a little bit of the setting as well to make it more contemporary, to make it adequate to the times that we're living in the states, and particularly in these areas that are completely gentrified,
Gentrified. Yeah.
gentrified. Sorry, my English was blocking me here. Um, and so those were kind of some of the things. I thought the casting was super. Oh, one of the other changes that he also took a little bit of a gamble was he changed the order in which some of these songs were sang and also who sang them. So different characters doing it from different points of view. So, let's say there's a scene that in the original movie is sang by one of the female leads. In this movie was sang by one of the male leads. And it
Hmm.
kind of changed a little bit of the perspective, but actually was really well suited and made the narrative really work. In fact, in many ways, looking back at it now, one of the reasons why I gave it a 4.5 star rating instead of a five was because I thought to myself, you know what? I love this movie, but I love the original more. So I can't because the original exists, I'm gonna have to give this one a 4.5 stars.
Hmm.
Now, if I could take that away, if I could maybe change my rating, I would probably put both of them on an even 5-star rating,
Hmm.
and maybe I would pend slightly more towards the this remake. But like yourself, when you were thinking, was it really justified that this movie needed to be made? I agree with you. I felt the same way, and that's one of the reasons why I was so put off by it. But differently to you, where you felt like, oh, my experience with Clint Eastwood and Jersey Boys was so bad that I don't want to ruin this other great director by seeing him attempt to do something that's going to be pretty bad. For me, that works the other way around. I was really curious to see how Steven Spielberg adapted this movie, and if anything, part of the reason why I justified, this remake that no one asked for was sort of to think like a movie, not a movie, sorry, a theater director, someone who decides to take on this play and who wants to make it his own, right? But every time, I don't know how many times I've seen Hamlet or Macbeth on stage since
Hmm.
I've moved over to London. Macbeth alone, I've maybe seen it like 4 times in the last a couple of years. Hamlet as well, I've seen versions in Portuguese and in English. But I always like to see how different people try and bring different things into the story.
Hmm.
Uh, and I kind of took away the same line of thinking into Spielberg. How is he going to try and make this thing his own? What is his interpretation? What is his connection? And actually, the more I read about it, and the more I came to realize that there was a special emotional connection with this movie, the more inclined and the more I favored this brand new West Side Story. Even when the credits were rolling at the end,
Hmm.
I was emotional to see my girlfriend's emotion when the dedication, the movie came, like the credits were rolling and he saw dedicated to my father, something like that. So the movie was
Hmm.
dedicated to his father. And so that prompted my girlfriend to react in a very emotional way. She thought it was a beautiful thing. And that really also triggered me to think about, how this movie must really mean a lot to Spielberg as a kid growing up, his connection with his father, how he really wanted to have a shot at doing it. And so all these elements brought in together really made West Side Story a really special film to me. And there was one particular friend that I discussed it with, someone who is a heavy, heavy fan of musicals to the point where she had pushed me so much to see some of the classics, such as West Side Story, that I immediately had to say to her, listen, you need to do yourself a favor and watch West Side Story from Steven Spielberg. I don't know how you feel about it. You might not even want to watch it because I know how much of a hardcore fan you are
Hmm.
of all these musicals from back in the day. But watch it because I would love to hear your thoughts. And
Hmm.
so a part of me was very confident that she would love it, but there was a slightly tiny little bit, like, part of me that was scared. I might be putting myself out there and she might hate it and all my credibility goes away. And fortunately enough, I'm happy to say that she was thrilled. She loved it. She watched it with her sister, who was also a big musical fan, and both of them had a blast watching it and had nothing to say but just lots of praise. And so I really think West Side Story is one of the true outstanding films that came out this year. When we talk about how this movie was lackluster, sorry, how this year was lackluster, even when I look at some of the nominations, I'm keen to say some of them are not really strong. I
Hmm.
really like to emphasize that West Side Story is part of the elite that I think will have a long lasting sort of legacy, even when you put into consideration the classic, the original one that was made. And by the way, just one last thing. I know we're going to get this into a separate category, but the casting is really incredible in this film. And Ariana DeBose, who plays the role that was done by Rita Moreno originally, I'm going to say something controversial here. I actually think she probably does it even better than Rita Moreno. And
Hmm.
Rita Moreno was the highlight. The
Yes.
other thing that I would say is that Hansel playing Tony in this movie is completely forgettable. He is the only thing. He is the only thing actually that would stop me from maybe giving it the 5-star rating. No, I would still give it, I guess, but he is just so forgettable. I'm so happy that I don't feel like he's relevant enough, even though the movie revolves around his love story with Maria. I don't think I don't think he's relevant enough for me to care, because there's so much to look elsewhere. You
Hmm.
know, even the girl who plays Maria, she is so well casted for a girl who's pretty much been anonymous to a degree,
Hmm.
and who took that big leap in making this role. I thought she was fantastic, but lots of credit goes to Ariana, who played this
Anita.
amazing supporting actress. Yeah, this Anita role was just completely mind blowing.
Hmm. Well, I was about to ask that when we get to the best supporting actress category, but I will need to reevaluate my West Side Story position or the 2021 version, and we conclude the best picture analysis with the Power of the Dog, and I think we touched on it a bit already. I still like it. I think it's a very good anti-Western, revisionist Western, whatever, in line with Heaven's Gate or El Topo. And I think Jane Campion really deconstructs, the tall, silent cowboy stereotype image of the 1950s and 60s with a very good movie, right? I think.
Not according to Sam Shepard.
Yeah, the Sam Elliott. Yes, I know.
Sam Elliott, sorry, not Sam
Yes,
Shepard.
yes.
Sam Elliott, yeah.
I was about to say that, and I think that actually will play in favor of the movie. His comments, and this is a way of the Academy to redeem themselves from the 2005, Crash versus Brookback Mountain debacle. But beyond that, I think like you can complain and people can be underwhelmed about this movie, and I heard a lot of people complaining about it, but I think things really work. The pace is adequate, the cinematography is just beautiful, and the director Jane Campion, used a lot of the same images from the Western classics that really defined American cinema, and I mean the performances are just great, all four of them, and I mean for me this was the best movie of 2021. It is the front runner, and I don't know, it just won the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes for Best Picture and Best Director. I think for the first time in many years, I may be aligned with the Academy in selecting the Best Picture. But what's your take on this one?
I will say this. I don't think it was the strongest movie personally, and according to my personal taste.
Hmm.
But I can totally see why this is the favorite to win, and I have no problems with it, no quarrels with it. If this movie wins the Oscar for Best Picture, I would say it was well deserved. It was not my personal preference. I did feel that the pace was a bit slow, and I did think that the expectations that I had were, because they were so high, they probably were not met at the level that I was expecting. I heard from a few people, who are people that I respect and who analyze film in a critical and interesting way, that they didn't really believe Benedict Cumberbatch as a cowboy. There was plenty of scenes where they didn't feel like he was actually well casted. Some of the scenes that were pointed out to me, I could understand what they were saying, even though I'm a big fan of his and I liked him in this role. I think there's a few things that people can nitpick and say enough things to maybe not make it this outstanding film. I don't think it's a movie for everyone, and that's why I think we've been seeing some sort of mixed reviews when it comes to the big audiences.
Hmm.
But then, I think the critics have spoken and they said that this is a great film, and everything that they praise about the film, really, when you're really trying to like pick them up one by one, there's very little that you can disagree. I mean, the
Yeah.
film is just fantastic on all technical levels. The story is great. It's a slow burn, but it really builds up this tension and this um, incredible sort of like uh, ending, right? there's a lot of things, like a lot of subplots, a lot of themes that are really thought provoking and really shows you um, some of the the issues of the time, the taboos, the sort of like masculinity and how it was perceived back then, particularly with this image of of a cowboy.
Hmm.
You were saying Sam Elliott. We were talking about Sam Elliott and some of his remarks that he seemed to have issues with, with homosexuality and all that stuff. I thought, it's all very intriguing and it's all very sort of interesting to put in a film like this. And one other word that I want to sort of like, well, sorry, let me rephrase that. Another thing that I would like to also address is the acting by all four of them. It was great. I have to say though, I I really like Kirsten Dunst, and I was really rooting for her. I think she's good. I couldn't understand why she was seen as this like really outstanding performance. I think I
Hmm.
preferred a lot more Cody and as this in the category of supporting actor, and I thought Cody was great, and Benedict Cumberbatch was really outstanding. I think it's going to be a toss up between him and Will.
No, I agree. It was great to see first Kirsten Dunst nominated for the first time. Jesse Plemons again. I was surprised to see him nominated, but we'll get to that in a bit. But great performances overall, and I mean, a great movie. But I'm with you. There seems to be a misalignment between the audiences and the critics, as usual. And I think, yeah, even for like, I don't know, this movie has been on Netflix, and people usually they watch it and they don't watch it until the very end or something like that. So it's interesting. But let's see if there's any post award boost. We now go back to the five nominee categories, and I mean, I think, yeah, we already touched on this, but all the nominations, with some minor exceptions, they've been pretty much in line. And when I look at the best director lineup, I mean, there's even Steven Spielberg. I mean, if people really liked his job or what he did with the musical, I think out of the five nominees, Paul Thomas Anderson, Jane Campion, Steven Spielberg, Kenneth Branagh, and even Hamaguchi from Drive My Car. I mean, all of them were great picks. If I had my way, and again, this is probably not. It's due to the fact that I haven't seen West Side Story. I would have replaced Spielberg with Denis Villeneuve, uh, but, but that's just me. Like, even with his omission, I still cannot complain about the top five nominees. But also, no real surprises other than Hamaguchi. But it's not a surprise because he did such a great job that, okay, he was his merit was reflected on the nomination, but that's it, right? There were no real shockers here, and I don't know, what are your takes on the five nominees.
All right. So looking at the five nominees, I'm very much inclined to agree with you with most of them. I do have a personal issue with Belfast, as you know, so therefore I
Hmm.
wouldn't be able to consider Kenneth Branagh, just because that movie didn't resonate so much with me, and I would uh, throw in someone in there like Guillermo del Toro, for instance, for Nightmare Alley, or even Cohen for the Tragedy of Macbeth. But for me, I mean, I'm giving you these two examples as directors that I would easily fit in rather than Kenneth. But for me, there's one obvious director missing, which is obviously the mastermind behind Dune. I mean, I just can't believe that a movie that's gotten so many nominations, 10 if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
one of the biggest films of the year, it's pretty much hit all
Self-made,
the.
self-made,
It,
self-directed.
I mean, it's really, it really baffles me how you not having Denis as a director nominated in this category. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know you're pretty much aligned with these films, but actually, I would love to hear your take on what do you think about Denis missing out on the five nominations?
I mean, yeah, I guess we agree on that. I mean, the man was even at the BAFTAs, right? And they nominated him for Blade Runner 2049. Um, so I mean, I really don't know how he missed that one. I guess here the only we both agreed that we would like to include Denis Villeneuve, but the only change is that I would remove Spielberg, you would remove Brana. The thing that's interesting and also it was a bit of a shock when he wasn't included, but again, only five can be included, and none of the five shocked me particularly. The fact is that a lot of people think that he will be nominated for Dune Part Two as kind of like the conclusion. And they use Peter Jackson, the fact that he was nominated for the Fellowship of the Ring and Return of the King, but not for the Two Towers, right? So I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense because they still should be seen as separate movies.
Hmm.
But the fact is they were part of something that was already announced. It's not the sequel is not an afterthought, and so people, I guess this is how, yeah, the Academy or even people in general feel about it. So let's see how it goes, and if this is half part of something, let's see it. But I agree with you. That doesn't mean that the movie should be nominated for 10 awards and miss the 11th one. Um, it almost seems like the movie self-directed. Yeah.
But even with this all said, though, as you mentioned, it's a really strong category. There's obviously five great filmmakers in all of them. It's hard to say. I mean, I have a preference for three in particular: P.T. Anderson,
Yeah.
Jane Campion, and Steven Spielberg. I think, as we've seen from multiple award ceremonies um, earlier this year, Jane Campion seems to be
Yeah, the
the
favorite.
favorite.
Yeah, I mean, she's long overdue. She directed a movie that I really liked, at the Piano, 1993,
Hmm.
and she was, I think, at the time, what, the second, only the second female nominee or the third female nominee in this category. She won for Best Original Screenplay back then. So, I mean, I am looking forward at least to get full closure, and I think this will, well, at least if not, make some advances on, variety or diversity in this category, because last year you had Chloe Zhao, now you'll have Jane Campion, and I think we're starting to see a shift in the pattern here. And most importantly, I think it's not diversity. This is what diversity should look like, not uh, that it should follow a standard. This is diversity, but diversity based on merit, right? You could argue that last year Chloe Zhao maybe shouldn't or wasn't the best director. I think she was, and I picked Nomadland and as my favorite of the year. And this year, the same thing with The Power of the Dog. So I completely agree that Jane Campion will win. If not, I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson. I know, long shot, but I would love to see him eventually win this award.
Same.
If we move to best actor, right? I don't think there were a lot of surprises here again. Perhaps Javier Bardem. I don't know if you already watched Being the Ricardos, or
No,
no, you
out
haven't.
of this category, it's the only film that I haven't seen yet in
Hmm.
terms of the
Hmm.
actors. So I
Yeah,
can't really vouch.
yeah, no, I asked this because for me it was a very good performance. It's part of a package, not really, I guess, as maybe Benedict Cumberbatch or even Will Smith. But I think Javier Bardem was the one that stood out as, oh, okay, they went there. But at the same time, I don't know exactly who he would replace. I think Benedict Cumberbatch from the movies that I've seen would be my pick, but being completely a realist, it is Will Smith's to lose, especially after last year's upset with Chadwick Boseman. But what are your thoughts on the five nominees?
No, I mean, it's hard for me. I mean, I don't want to. It's difficult to comment when you have um, an actor like Javier Bardem, who I know is very talented, but he's doing a film that I haven't seen, so I can't really comment on that. Um, I can make general assumptions based on what people have said, including yourself, just saying that that the reaction was a bit in this like a surprise almost. I do think that there's two actors that I would love to throw into the mix.
Nicolas
Um,
Cage.
Nick Cage is one. I honestly think that Pig, and someone said this. I don't know who said this, but someone was suggesting that it would have been interesting if Pig had been released at a different time, because maybe it would have been considered or looked in a different way. Because I remember when Pig came out, there was such a push for it, saying, "Oh my God, we might have one of the big contenders for the Oscars this year." I mean,
Hmm.
it was ages ago. I mean, none of these Oscar nominated films were coming out yet,
Yeah.
and everyone was already putting Pig as like the best film of the year. So clearly, there was almost like this marketing campaign to make it super big. I'll be honest, it didn't disappoint. I really think it was a great film. Obviously, there's a lot of in me that wants to root for Nick Cage, and also this director. It was his debut, so it was his first film doing Pig, and so all of it just felt like a little bit of the underdog, and which is something that I empathize with. But I truly think, I remember I always butcher the name. It's Leaving Las Vegas, right? The movie that Nick Cage won.
Yes.
And I remember watching that film and just thinking Nick Cage is such a great actor, and I've seen so much stuff from him as well. From remember seeing like Raising Arizona when I was growing up, and um, even like other films that he did along the way, um, which I thought were great. But then he just went on this rampant sort of decline of just doing every other film that came his way, and to actually see a movie that felt that was well nurtured and well acted, and there was a lot of thought behind his process. I mean, it was just great, and I don't want to seem like I'm saying that every other film that he does was not thought of or whatever. I think he's a really interesting artist. I remember there was this really cool interview by Ethan Hawke who said that probably it said something about how Nick Cage um, was one of the best actors of his generation because he felt like he was constantly taking chances and he was always experimenting with his own acting. And it was only until Ethan Hawke said that I actually started paying attention to a lot of these things, and I felt like it was true. Although those movies just felt so muddled in between everything else that he was doing that it was hard to pay attention and find these little gems if he was actually doing it. Like, I remember like Bad Lieutenant, for instance. It was one of those
Hmm.
films that when I saw it came as a huge surprise because he was actually very, very good in it. But he had done so much stuff before and after that that was so crap that it's very easy for those films to sometimes get lost. Fortunately enough, a film like Pig really had a lot of push online, and that's what got people to watch it because otherwise I would have never entertained the idea of seeing Pig. Everything about it just seemed very unappealing. But then, I saw it and it was very appealing. I just thought, wow, this is what I want Cage to be doing. This is great. This is him at his best level. So I would have loved to see that because A, I think he's a great actor. B, I think it would be a good push for his career.
Hmm.
And C, I think there's maybe here one or two. I mean, it's tricky. Like Javier, I haven't seen, so I can't comment.
Hmm.
Andrew Garfield, like I want to give him a lot of praise because I love him as an actor, and I think that he did a really good job in this film, even though I didn't love it.
Hmm.
I thought it was an okay film, but he did great, and he's really out of his comfort zone because he's singing and dancing, doing all these things that he's not done before. And today I watched the Tragedy of Macbeth, and
Denzel
it,
Washington.
it's hard to criticize. It's hard to say something bad about it because he just he's such a magnetic actor to watch, and and especially delivering such an iconic role done by all the greats in acting. And
Hmm.
I thought it was great to see the director give him a chance to do this because a lot of people would have issue with why you have a black actor playing a character like Macbeth. Like Macbeth, it's great. I mean, it's such a great thing to have this platform where you can see all this amazing talent do roles that really don't. They're really not attached. There's nothing about Macbeth I mean, obviously he was done to be played by a white actor, but there's nothing about the character per se that makes him necessarily a white character. So it's cool to play with it and to have different actors. I know this will tap into other controversial discussions and all that stuff, but I thought it was a really cool casting choice. It was great to see an actor of Denzel's character caliber to play such a fantastic role, and he really delivered it. So it's like it really pains me. Like I would not take him off that list because I just think he's flawless. I mean, he's great to watch.
Hmm.
Is it a role that I've seen it too many times before done by other actors? Yes, it is. So it's not really that fresh when I think about everyone else.
Hmm.
But he's just like he's flawless. He's so good. He's so good. I'm so happy that I watched this film and that he delivered such a performance. So I mean, this big rant to say it would be hard to mess around with this list. I feel like maybe if I watched Being the Ricardos, maybe I would take Javier Bardem out to put Nick Cage in.
Hmm.
But there's a slight bias here because A, I've not seen this movie, and B, I'm really rooting for Nick Cage.
Yeah, well, that's I still haven't seen Pigs, so it goes on my list. It's been there for a while, but yeah, I think it's a solid five pick. And I guess with that we move to best actress, and this was the one that shocked me a bit because I guess the Academy didn't really care for either Jennifer Hudson's take on Aretha Franklin, Lady Gaga's Italian accent, even Alana Haim's stellar debut, or even Renate Heinzva superb acting on Worst Person in the World, right? So we were stuck with, or not stuck, but at least shortlisted with, and it's kind of funny, right? The potential winners could all hail from biopics, right? Jessica Chastain, Kristen Stewart, or Nicole Kidman. But there it goes again, the success of being in a biopic. But I mean, you watched Kristen Stewart and Spencer, and I bet you watched a couple of other nominees here. Again, your take on this one?
I saw three of them. I saw Lizzie Coleman in The Lost
Hmm.
Daughter. I saw Parallel Mothers, so I got to see
Yeah.
Penelope and Spencer.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm very surprised by some of the omissions here. I haven't seen Lady Gaga and I haven't seen House of Gucci,
Hmm.
but everyone kept raving about it. How not the movie per se, but her performance. In fact, it was almost like it was the only good thing, unanimously the good thing about the film. Um, so I was surprised not to see her name in there. Personally speaking, from some of the movies that I've seen, I would have easily taken Penelope Cruz to put in either Alana Haim or Rachel Ziegler, who plays
Hmm.
Maria in West Side Story. I really think Alana is probably like my favorite because she was truly the heart and soul of Licorice Pizza.
Yes.
And for a movie of that quality to have such an outstanding leading character like her to not
Hmm.
be nominated, I just think it was
A missed
a big
opportunity.
mistake.
Yeah.
Exactly, by the Academy. And Penelope would be probably the first place I start. Um, I wouldn't go. I couldn't say about Jessica or Nicole because I haven't seen both of those films,
Hmm.
and I'm actually a huge fan of both of them, particularly Jessica Chastain. I think she's one of the finest actresses of her time. In fact, sorry, let me rephrase that. I think she's one of the finest actors of her time. I think beyond. I don't like to discuss genders when I'm looking at the quality of an actor, and I think she's one of the best I've seen. And but like Olivia Colman, for instance, thought she was really good in The Lost Daughter. I've seen her do better. I think I wasn't particularly surprised by the performance. I liked it.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a stretch. Like Penelope, I can say without a doubt, I would take her out. Olivia, not so much because it's hard. Like, part of me wants to take her out. Sorry, because I want to add some new blood into it, and I really feel like Alana really has
Hmm.
the advantage of being in an excellent film, whereas Olivia Colman, she's really good. The movie though was good. I thought it had some really good things in it. but I felt like it was a good movie without ever being memorable.
Good, not great.
Exactly, exactly. So that's why I'm also sort of like almost like leaning a little bit towards Olivia, but it's hard for me to lean over her because she is a fabulous actor, and I think
Mhm.
she's really outstanding, and she did deliver in this film. But Penelope would be my first one out to create space for Alana.
Hey, I'm completely with you on that one. In fact, I think I'd be flexible with any of the nominees to make room for Alana Hay. I think, yeah, still this year is a bit of a toss up, and it's funny because I guess it really came down to either Lady Gaga or Jessica Chastain because they both put in like a very campy performance, or at least represent a campy or a caricature of a campy persona. And I mean, it's just interesting to know if Lady Gaga was the kind of, oh, I won't vote for her because everybody else will, or we can't have two people portraying similar, similar tones of personality in the same category. But I mean, it's a bit of a toss up. I did enjoy Nicole Kidman's take on a strong female character, such as Lucille Ball. Not fully sure about. Well, Jessica Chastain is probably the highlight of the Eyes of Tammy Faye, and again, I really disliked Andrew Garfield's performance on that movie. And I mean, Spencer, I really haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on Kristen Stewart. But it's a bit of a toss up this category. It's not as locked as the one before with Will Smith.
She was good though. I was just picking up
Hmm.
on Kristen Stewart. She was surprised. I think it's interesting actually because she really divides audiences. There's a lot of people who don't really credit her as a good actress. Feel like for a lot of people it feels like she's always the same in every film that she does. Um, I actually came into this film rooting for her because I feel that she, like Robert Pattinson, I think she takes a lot of chances with the movies that she picks. And the reason why I brought Robert, obviously, is because they kind of came in the scene or broke into the scene, particularly with the Twilight series. Even though they had done other stuff before, she had done like the Panic Room, he had done Harry Potter, whatever. But I think both of them, their careers got really tarnished by Twilight, and then so all you see is both of them trying to break away from those roles and take on different challenges. And Robert does really well in doing that and has picked amazing projects and always delivered, or mostly has delivered. And Kristen, I sort of feel like she in a way she's also delivered, but you have to see these niche films that she's done. I mean, she's even won if I'm not mistaken, probably she won Cannes, I think, for Best Actress a while ago. For Shop Girl, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember, but she had some really odd movie choices that really revealed the degree
Hmm.
of range that people didn't know about. And so when a movie like this, Spencer, comes out, it really puts her out in a big platform for everyone to watch her. Uh, I went in thinking I really want this to be good because I want her to succeed. And I came out of it thinking she was great. I don't think it's a unanimous thing. I think there's still a lot of people who haven't really enjoyed her performance, but I'm just making a point of really highlighting her performance here. I'm not saying she's a favorite, not at all, but I like to talk about her because I think she divides opinions,
Hmm.
and so I think it will be interesting to see how she fares in the Academy Oscars this year.
Hmm. Let's see. It's a competitive category, this one, and with that in mind, we move to best supporting actor. It seemed to be Cody Smith McPhee's category until it wasn't, and it's now a bit all over the place. And I believe Troy Couture is the lead on this one. I think this one here is it was a bit surprising, right? Because I mean, well, first of all, the Academy again didn't go for Jared Leto's Italian accent, I guess, and I was surprised here to see that Belfast nomination going for Kieran Hinds instead of Jamie Dornan, and uh, I don't know. It was a bit of a surprise. This lineup, but I was glad to see some love for J.K. Simmons. I mean, I can only comment on Cody Smith McPhee, and I think he was already like considered to be the front runner when I watched The Power of the Dog, and so I think that may have amplified his gravitas on screen. But I would love to hear your thoughts on well, Cody's performance versus Troy's performance in Coda.
So before I get to that, just a quick mention of two other actors. Well, I
Oh
could
yeah.
say three, but I haven't really. So J.K. Simmons, I haven't seen Being the Ricardos, but I
Hmm.
think he's a great actor. And if anything, him being nominated actually even ramped up my willingness to see this film because I want to see how he fares.
Oh, he's
Uh,
great. He's great in it. Don't worry.
I always like him. It's always such a delight to see him on screen, regardless of what he does, big or small, whatever role he picks up, it's always going to be great. So I'm really looking forward to that. Kieran Hines, I actually really liked him a lot more than Jamie Dornan. With Kieran, actually, I enjoyed him a lot more than I did with Jamie. Even though I know Jamie has a lot more scenes, he's sort of like the movie has focuses a little bit more on him. But with Kieran Hines' character, it really reminded me of the grandfather in Little Miss Sunshine, played by Alan Arkin. Uh,
Alan Arkin,
it's
yeah.
just the vibe of it that just really sort of resonated with me. The endearing grandfather who really sort of like treats this kid as a young adult and gives him lots of. It's almost like he's like a second father figure in many ways, and I just felt like it was always such a enjoyable presence in that film. I'm not saying that he's a favorite to win. I'm just pointing out that it was great to see him in the screen. Now, the other character, the other actor, sorry, that I wanted to mention is Jesse Plemons. I was surprised, as you were, to see him on that list, but I do want to say that he is a great actor. I mean, I honestly believe that he will have. He's one of those actors. I put him in a category like Paul Dano, in the sense of
Hmm.
guys who actors who do roles who are very much at some points underrated, but always incredibly high in its quality. And I do foresee awards for them in the future, and an Oscar in
Hmm.
particular. I do think that Jesse, such as like Paul Dano, will get these big awards at some point in their careers. I don't think it will be the case with this
Hmm.
film because I don't think he was that great, but at some point he will. Now, focusing on the two highlights, I guess, between Troy and Cody.
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know. It's a coin toss. I love both of them. They're very different in the style of films and performances that they're delivering. But I love both of them. If any of them is the winner, I'll be like, you know what? I'm happy. It's great. I guess
Hmm.
obviously
Hmm.
Troy seems to be the more outside the box option in the sense of it would be a big surprise and it would definitely be a big talking point and would do so good for diversity and for the deaf community in particular. We often have these conversations about how we should include more people from different sorts of groups and minorities and so on to give them exposure and the platform to play these roles that were, obviously meant for them to a degree. And so,
Hmm.
this would be a way of saying, you know what, you made this bet on someone who belongs to that community rather than just going for the argument of, oh, but an actor's role is to act, is to play different roles. Yeah, sure, but if there's very little offer of certain roles to a community, why not then maybe focus on finding talent that will give you a precise, accurate, more real sort of performance. I think there are arguments to both sides, but I think they've made a good choice in Troy and clearly delivered it. So if he was to win, I think that would be a win for uh, 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 something much bigger than Troy as just an actor. Um, but again, either way, I'll be happy for any of those two to win because I think both of them are
Hmm.
thoroughly deserving.
Yeah, just picking up on your point of Paul Dano and Jesse Plemons. I mean, really looking forward to see later this year his performance in the new or the upcoming Martin Scorsese movie. But I agree, Jesse Plemons has been making some waves, and well, for a shorter period than Paul Dano. But Paul Dano is long overdue for not only a nomination but also a first nomination, but also a
Hmm.
win. And I mean, I will have to check out Coda, but again, very happy with these nominees, at least from the performances that I've seen. And I think still, if we use Belfast as a bridge, we saw the same thing with the best supporting actress category. Again, this movie pulled the sneaky on us, and the Academy picked Judy Dench over Katrina Boff. Um, and I mean, who was the pundit's favorite and who has a very relevant role as the mother.
Yeah, I mean, I that's probably the only big swap I would do, Katrina for Dench. I love
Yeah.
Judy Dench. Always loved her as an actor, but I just don't think she does quite enough in this film to justify getting the nod over Katrina. And even Kate Blanchett. I mean, I would prefer to have Kate Blanchett over Dench anytime in this category because I really think she was so good in Nightmare Alley that would deserve a lot more than nod. But let's be honest. I mean, this conversation for me feels a little bit redundant because I think this is one of the few categories where there's very little space for an argument because I think everyone seems to think
Yes.
that Ariana will win the
Will
Oscar
win.
for her performance as Anita in West Side Story, and I do think that she is. You know, even with all categories combined, when I look at all the actors that I've seen, so from best actor in a lead role and supporting role and actress as well, I think she was by far the most talented out of all of them. I would pick her as my favorite over Will Smith, for instance, when looking at the lineup.
Yes, she appears to be, well, pretty much like Will Smith, winning consistently. And again, she's tackling a character that previously won Rita Moreno an Oscar, and you even say that she does a different but maybe better job than Rita Moreno at this. And I mean, yeah, it seems to be locked. I would just like to say it was great to see Kirsten Dunst nominated as well, for the first time ever. And just a quick overview in terms of the screenplays. I mean, I couldn't be happier. Other than again, Adam McKay and Don't Look Up. I think it's just a fantastic lineup of 10 screenplays, and to see the worst person in the world thrown in the bunch was a terrific surprise. Also, Paul Thomas Anderson, a staple. The likes of Belfast and Power of the Dog, even Drive My Car. It was just really great to see the variety of the stories that they decided to honor as nominees. And I mean, I do hope we get to see a bit more of the Parasite effect, if we want to call it like that, and see even more international features and different stories, maybe in next year's edition. I'd like to take this as the opportunity to ask you for some final thoughts on the overall nominees and maybe some expectations for this year in
Well,
cinema.
I'm going to tell you this: for a movie that was so lackluster, as we said throughout this whole episode, it's interesting to see that we've really went for it in terms of length of our conversation. I mean, obviously not everything is going to air, but we've been talking for ages, and we haven't really addressed a lot of the categories that we usually do over the years. So it's funny
Yes,
to actually see
yes,
that, despite the fact that there weren't as many amazing movies as previous years, there were certainly lots of talking points and lots to be said about
yes.
not only the films but also the time in which they were released. So I think
Hmm.
one of the overall messages that I think you and I are both in agreement and that we've touched upon in this episode is the fact that as moviegoers, as people who love cinema, who love this industry, it is amazing to be out there again in the cinema rooms, to be able to see these films in the big screen where they belong, and to finally be able to also see all these different productions sort of be released and be free to put out their projects, to develop new ideas, and to work on things that might surprise us even further. And who knows, maybe next year we'll have a different conversation from this one, and we'll start by saying what an amazing year this was. Every single film that came out was an absolute five-star rating. So
Well, at least I'm reserving that for the Scorsese upcoming
let's hope for
Scorsese.
it.
I'm a Scorsese fanboy. But Duarte, I completely agree with you, and here's to hoping we have a great 2022 in movies, and I'll have you here again next year as a guest for your 5-time
Can't wait, baby.
guest. I'll get you a T-shirt, personalized T-shirt with the logo and everything as the 5-time
Oh
honorary
man,
member.
thank you. Such a
Duarte,
pleasure to be here talking to you, Pedro. Honestly.
as always, a pleasure, man. And well, I'll see you in person earlier than that, but hopefully as a guest next year as
Thank
well.
you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks. Ok, papá, olha.